Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to give it another minute or two for people to trickle in, and then we'll get started. All right, so we have a lot of information to cover, so I think we'll get started. Just a quick introduction. My name's Danae Gailey. I am a care manager here with BDDS. And also about halfway through the presentation, we're going to switch over to a new presenter, Andrea Hatch. She is also a care manager here with BDDS. So welcome. This is part 2 of a 2-part training for self-direction support brokers. So today we're going to cover the new SSP form, some costing sheets, the SSP change forms, and some other special use forms. So some kind of housekeeping things. We will pause periodically throughout the training for questions. Feel free to type those questions at any time in the chat box. And so we ask that you exit out of the Q&A box and we use the chat box itself. And if you could possibly please put your questions into everyone or all panelists, we wouldn't want to miss them, and they are hard to miss if they are directly to the host or to one person in particular. We also, if there's a question that's easier for you to ask verbally, encourage you to use the raise your hand feature, click that, and we will open the lines up at the stopping points so you can ask those questions verbally if it's easier. So when we get into this, the slides are kind of presented in a way that are instructions and examples. So when I start presenting, we're going to jump into some of the examples and skip over those instructions just for presentation purposes today. But please note that the slides and the draft ISP documents, you should have received them before the presentation today. If for some reason you weren't on the list, everything will be posted to the My Choice Matters website. And also the part 1 has been posted on the My Choice Matters website, so you'll be able to reference back to that as well. So the general overview of what we're talking about today is the support and spending plans, the support and spending plan costing pages, support and spending plan changes, certified family home alone time changes, and some other special use forms. So these are the first section here is some general plan review, plan change review guidelines. So when our self-direct care managers receive the plans, they're going to review the plan and supporting documentation, and they're going to approve plans when all of the conditions, the following conditions are met. So all required documentation is submitted and completed accurately. The participant qualifies for all the services on the plan, and they are within our established guidelines. The services address their needs and service preferences. They maintain the participants' rights and address risks with the least restrictive methods. And the plan is either with the advisory budget. The advisory budget is that budget that we talked about in part 1. That's the new budget that you're getting from Liberty with the new resource allocation tool. Or it's within the assigned budget and still needs to meet all those prior authorization requirements. In the assigned budget, it will either be that advisory budget or their new ARP budget, which the ARP budget was going to be the budget they had the highest budget they had from April 1st, 2021 forward. Very similar to KW now, but if it's within those budgets, they still need to meet prior authorization requirements, and we're going to go over that in detail in the next slide, what those requirements are. Or if it exceeds the assigned budget, so it exceeds all of the budgets, we would require a budget modification request with documentation that establishes that all of those services over budget meet and address health or safety needs. This is similar to the health and safety risk forms that we're doing now. So care managers will work with support brokers to resolve any issues causing the plan to not meet the requirements above. And if any of those issues can't be resolved, the plan will be denied either fully or partially, and you'll get that denial with any appeal rights. So the next part is going over that prior authorization requirement in detail. So this is from IDAPA 16.3.10.507. The purpose of adult developmental disability services prior authorization is to assure the provision of the right care in the right place at the right price and with the right outcomes in order to enhance health and safety and to promote participants' rights, self-determination, and independence. Prior authorization involves the assessment of the needs for services, development of a budget, development of a plan of services, prior approval of services, and a quality improvement program. Services are reimbursable if they are identified on the authorized plan of services or of service and are consistent with the purpose and rule for prior authorization, as well as rules for specific service. Okay, so now we're going to touch base on the submission timeline. So initial, annual, prorated, and mid-year plans are due 45 days prior to the requested start date. The only difference here is that we've added the addition of mid-year plans, so those will be due 45 days prior to the requested start date. So in extenuating circumstances where something needs to be expedited, the participant needs services as soon as possible in that 45 days, it's just not possible. We do ask the support brokers reach out to the assigned care manager and work with them to see if we need to expedite that start date. Extensions will also be an option if the previous plan if we need to do that. Late plan notices will be sent out if the plan is not received within 1 week after the plan's due date listed on the eligibility. And the exceptions to that is if the plan is late due to eligibility delays, or the support broker has communicated that with the care manager and reached out regarding that delay. The next slide details incomplete plans. So I just want to make note here that during implementation, we will not be sending incomplete plan notices. We will be sending corrections emails, and on those emails, the care managers have been asked to CC QA. The CC to QA is not to start a plan of corrections or anything like that. It's strictly to identify gaps in any processes, trends, any training needs. It's just to help us to see those things and what is commonly being missed, and so we can work that out with everybody. There is a full list, though, once implementation is complete and we've kind of got the ball rolling. When the incomplete plans begin, those notices start going out, we'll communicate that. And then the list here is things that we will send those out on. I'm not going to read the list in detail, but you will have it on the My Choice Matters website as a resource if you want to check it out. I think one of the main takeaways from this is there's certain things on this new SSP form that will carry on over to every page. So, for example, in the header, and we'll get into the example and you'll be able to see that, the participant name, Medicaid ID, plan, start and stop date, all of those, if you input those incorrectly on that first page, they will carry on over to every single page. So we ask that you really verify that information is correct. All right, so do we have any questions before we jump into the actual SSP? Like I said, feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask something verbally, or send those messages in the chat box to all panelists or to everyone.
I'm not seeing any questions yet.
All right, perfect. We'll move on. So this first part of the SSP is going to be personal information, support broker information. Did you want to jump to that slide? Awesome. So like I said, the instructions for this in detail are on the previous slide. We're just jumping to the example so it's not repetitive for you. So the SSP is broke up into about 4 different categories. This first one is the personal and support broker information. It is very basic demographic information, so participant address, mailing address, guardian if applicable. Care managers will be checking if there's a guardian listed there that we have guardianship documents and all of that is squared away. Residential setting, we do ask that you select where that participant is residing, which one of those best meets their situation. And then it just does give a little reminder that if they are residing in a certified family home, they would need to have a current certificate. And then the plan summary information just asks whether this is an initial plan, an annual plan, or prorated plan. So when you're doing those mid-year plans, those are going to be a prorated plan. And then we are asking for the date that the workbook was completed on. The next category of the SSP is person-centered planning. So the whole person-centered planning section should be discussed during the PCP meeting and reflect the maximum possible involvement by the participant in that process. So there's a couple basic questions for that person-centered planning section. So how is the participant involved in his or her own PCP process? So we're asking if they attended the meeting, how they contributed, if, if for some reason they couldn't attend the meeting or they didn't want to attend the meeting. We also want to know how they were involved outside of that meeting. So if the goals were and their services were discussed before the meeting and after the meeting, and we got their buy-in, because we really want to make this their person-centered plan. And then on here, we ask that you list everybody that's involved in the process, including their name, their contact information, and their relationship. So much like it is now, so if the guardian is also a paid CSW, we will be checking to make sure there's at least one other person in addition to the support broker, the participant and guardian involved in that planning process who is not related by blood or marriage. And here's just an example of how that would look. All right, so the next section is participant strengths, goals, and preferences. The first question is, what did the participant identify as their, oh, I skipped a page, sorry. So the first question is, what are their strengths? So you're going to be asking the participant, the whole team, what we have identified as their strengths, and then would like you to list them there. So these are from anybody on the team and from the participant themselves. So this person's a good listener, makes friends easily, etc. And then we have what services are important to the participant. And so we want to include their preferred providers, delivery preferences, and to make note here, even if they're not services that they're accessing at that current time, we still want to include those in here. So it may not be on the plan, there may be something in the works that get them services, or maybe they're services that are just not applicable to them. But any of those, what's important to them needs to be listed there. So the question here is, or the example here says that they would like to maintain a certified family home with Mary Jones. They enjoy their community support workers. They want them to be, it's flexible and consistent for mental health stability. And then this third question is, what did the participant identify as their personal goals and desired outcomes? So it's expected that we ask the participant in their meeting what their personal goals are and desired outcomes and list them. So these can even be something as crazy as, you know, they want to be Batman. We want to know that they were involved in this process and that we are taking their considerations into this plan. So also to note here, if they don't want to answer that question or they are unable to identify those goals because they're nonverbal, we're asking that you put a note in there stating the reason why they don't have the goals and make that note. And then we have what activities will assist them in achieving their desired goals and outcomes and who will complete them. So a discussion in that PCP meeting with the participant and the team, and then list those activities and who's going to help them complete them. So in this example, John wants to work on Computers 101. He wants to explore employment opportunities. He wants to save up for a game. So the support broker is going to link John to Voc Rehab and the Department of Labor to explore employment options. The guardian and payee is going to help him with budgeting and determining how much he wants to set aside to go ahead and go to that game. The next question is, where did the participant choose to live or receive services? So just listing out where their chosen living situation, and also make note that this is the same as what services are important to them. Even if they are not residing, we want where their chosen living situation. So maybe he's currently residing in a certified family home on self-direct, but you know, he would really prefer to be in a supported living with traditional, so we would indicate that here. And then what alternative service setting options were considered? So in this situation, John considered living with his guardian, but determined that they have a better relationship now that he lives in a different certified family home. He likes it there, but he is interested in learning about supported living on traditional waivers. So, and just other options that were discussed during that meeting. All right, so the next section of the plan is risk factors. So this also should be discussed during the meeting and reflect the most possible involvement by the participant in the process. This first section, the risk factor section, addresses home and community-based qualities. So the HCBS services must exhibit the following required qualities. Let me get a drink here. Integration and access where services and supports are provided. Selection of setting is based on their needs and preferences. Ensuring participant rights of privacy, dignity, and respect, and the freedom from coercion and unauthorized restraint are honored. Autonomy and independence of participant choices is optimized rather than regimented, and choices about services and supports provided in the setting are promoted. So this section that we're going to address, the risk factors section, if any of these HCBS qualities poses a risk to them, we're going to need that to be listed in this risk section. And then any other general risk to the participant and those around them would also be listed in this section. So the section is based off, it's got two columns. If you want to jump to that example. The first column, the left-hand column, is what risks to health and safety are present to the participant and or the people around them. So on here, we're asking that you identify all risks that have been, brought up by the participant, the team, and that might put the participant or people around them in danger, and any of those quality settings, the HCBS qualities that pose a risk, we want those listed here. And then on the right-hand side, what you're doing to mitigate that risk and minimize it. So strategies that the team has discussed that would help them respond to those identified risks. So for example, one of John's risks here is exploitation by others in the community. So LSS will work on safety skill goals in the community. These other categories will provide support while interacting with others in the community. The certified family home is going to work on alone time scenarios. And then, so those are just some examples there. The next part is the comprehensive risk and backup plans. So this is, we want you to identify what risk and what is the risk in the risk plan for when the CSW or natural supports are not available. And the left-hand side is going to list that risk. And then the right-hand side identifies 3 spots where we need those 3 backup plans, much like you do in the current SSP. So if those natural supports aren't available or paid supports are not available, what are we going to do with those 3 identified backup plans? And then also please note, if there's not enough room, if there's more risk than there are fields on this SSP, you guys will get an external manual with some SSP instructions in it that will tell you how to add more fields if we need to. So we also want to point out that if there is any alone time in the certified family home, this is where this would be addressed, and that is required if there is any alone time. So in this example, this says, I would like to increase my independence by spending up to 2 hours a week alone at home. My CSW will practice safety scenarios with me. If I'm left alone, I know how to call 911. And then those 3 backup plans are listed. All right. So the next section is the participants' rights section. Okay, so let's see, it looks like we have a question. Andrew, you want to start asking some questions and we'll do it. It seems like a good stopping point.
Yes, I can go ahead and read those, and some of these I can answer right off. The first question was, is there a new workbook also? The workbook is not going to be changing at this time, so there is no new workbook yet. And then the next question, and I think we may have already answered this, but the question was, how do we address this for a participant that is nonverbal or is not participating? And so I think Danae covered this a little bit, but you would just make note of that in that section, that they are nonverbal and not able to express that. Is there anything you want to add to that, Danae?
No, yeah, we just need that indicated as to why those questions couldn't be answered, and yeah, it's just documented in the plan. So.
Okay, and then there's another question. Isn't this a lot of duplication of goals that we are writing?
I think the point of this is we go to a PCP meeting, we establish their needs and where we need to develop those goals. So the goals may reflect a lot of this, but those goals should be indicative of what was discussed in the person-centered planning meeting, and this just kind of helps you get to those goals.
All right, and then the next question is this being recorded to refer to later or just the slides? And yes, this is being recorded so that it can be referred to at a later time.
Yep, and that will be posted on the My Choice Matters website.
And I think that's all of the questions that we have at this point.
Okay, perfect, we'll move on. So this next section is the participant rights section. So this is the provider-owned or controlled setting qualities. So the provider-owned or controlled settings qualities or controlled settings, including certified family homes that provide service to HCBS participants, must provide or support the following rights. Written agreement. So this is a lease or residential agreement for each participant. right to privacy, including lockable doors, choice of roommates, right to choose decor, furniture, right to control their own schedules and activities, access to food, visitors, meaning anyone at any time, and it's physically accessible. So if there is an exception to any of these rights listed here, you would need to fill out the participants' rights section, because there are some required things in HCBS rules that for some reason we can't, in some reason one of those rights poses a risk. So the participants' rights section starts out with the yes or no question. So are any of the rights being restricted? So if any of those things, any of those rights are being restricted, we need you to mark yes. If it's marked no, you can skip this whole section. Care managers will be checking to make sure that anything from the Liberty eligibility or any other documentation that we've received is addressed here. So if we're seeing that there may be a rights restriction, they may reach out to you and have you put it here. So the first question is describe what rights are being restricted and why, and what assessed needs are being addressed by the restriction. So this, for example, in this one, John needs to get approval from the certified family home provider to have visitors after 10 p.m. or 8 a.m. So this is addressing that visitors, anyone at any time. So, and then the needs that's being addressed by this talks about how he's made some unsafe decisions in the past when inviting strangers from the internet into the home, potentially putting himself, his providers, and roommates at risk. So he needs assistance to make safe decisions involving members of the community. So that blurb included the need that's being addressed and why, and what the restriction is. So the next section is provide a clear description of the support that's being used, with assuring the support will cause no harm to the participant. So the department doesn't authorize any restrictions that would cause any harm. So by putting what you're doing in this section, we're agreeing that it's causing no harm to them. So this description talks about in detail what that certified family home is doing with that restriction. So they're going to discuss with John any potential visitors during the hours of 10 to 8, the sleeping hours, to decide if the visitor is a stranger who presents a potential risk or is a visitor that the certified family home and John both agree is not a threat to anyone. If the visitor presents a potential risk, the certified family home provider will not allow the visitor to enter the home during those hours, and is going to redirect John to have the visitor during waking hours when someone is awake and available to monitor and address any potential issues. So the next question is list less intrusive methods previously implemented that were unsuccessful in addressing participant needs. So in the HCBS requirements, it is a requirement that if any of these exceptions are being made, that there have been less intrusive methods implemented. So in this situation, there were discussions with John to make safe choices regarding visitors, but he continued to invite strangers from the internet. So the next question is, how will the provider regularly collect data and measure the ongoing effectiveness of the restriction? This is also a requirement that if these exceptions are being made, that data needs to be collected and the ongoing effectiveness needs to be measured. So in this case, the certified family home is going to document any occurrence where John has invited a visitor in the home during those hours, and if the visitor was determined to be a threat. And then how often will they conduct reviews to determine if the restriction is necessary, if a transition plan can be developed, or if the restriction can be terminated? And so we're just looking for a frequency amount here, because it is also a requirement that the team conduct those reviews. All right, so before we jump into the supports or services and support section, do we have any questions?
It looks like we have one. The question is, do we know yet the date when we will start writing plans in this format?
So the proposed date for the new resource allocation tool to be implemented is June 1st. I think we're still waiting on CMS approval. So that may or may not change. And so once that new resource allocation tool is implemented and we get a budget, that's when you'll see these support and spending plans being used with the new tool, with the new allocation. Did you want to add something, Michael?
Yeah, that's correct. We are waiting for CMS approval still, even though we have that target date of June 1. We will communicate out through blast email and every other method that we can once we know for sure what that actual date is after we have received approval from CMS.
Perfect. Are we seeing any other questions?
I do not see any other questions.
All right, so we're going to jump into the services and support section of the plan. The first service and support that we're going to look at is the support broker responsibilities. So the support broker responsibilities section, Andrea, if you want to jump to the example, has a spot for the required task and other support broker tasks. So we are asking that every single required task that's in here, you allocate how many hours you estimate to spend on that. And then the other tasks, if requested by the participant, be listed in that second section and how many estimated hours you expect to spend on that. So when you're listing these hours in here, we're asking that they must align with the employment agreement that's completed each year, and the total must be aligned with the costing page and how many support broker hours are entered in there. So the next section it has the residential and discretionary goals summary. So there's columns here. The left-hand column is the category column. So this is just where you're going to identify the payment category being used for each line. So the payment categories are personal support services, learning support services, emotional support services, relationship support services, and transportation services. So we'll have you list that category there. And then in the home or community section, so we're asking you to identify the expected location of the services to be provided to accomplish the goals. As you notice on this example here, there's some that are specific to home, there's some that are specific to community, and there's some that are a combination, so both home and community. So if those goals are specific to home, then it needs to have its own line. If it's specific to community, it needs to have its own line. But if you can work on those goals in both home and community, then that can occupy the same line. So, and then the middle there is the goals. So provide a summary of the goals identified during that person-centered planning process. And then we'll just make sure that you're still using that separate line and it aligns with the category on the left-hand side. Also make note if 2-to-1 support is being requested, a 2-to-1 request form would be submitted with the plan. And then on the right-hand side, we have natural supports. So we're asking you to identify any natural or unpaid supports that will assist with meeting these goals. If there are multiple goals in one line, ensure that the natural supports summarize all the activities that apply there. The next section of the supports and services is the health, safety, and employment. So just to make note, any items here should not be requested in the plan if there are benefits available to pay for them from another source. So this is, you know, if it's paid for by adult Medicaid card, Medicare, or any supplemental coverage, we would expect that those be used before using the DD funds for that. So much like the other one, we have a category column. There are only 3 categories, payment categories, that can be listed in this section. So the first one is job support services. So this should be used when an adult requires direct support to obtain or maintain integrated community employment. It should not be used to describe volunteer work or informal job exploration. Skilled nursing services. So skilled nursing should be used when a medical professional, so primary care physician, doctor, has referred skilled therapies, nursing care, nursing oversight to be provided in the home or community. And so on those ones, we will be asked for the referral and credential to provide that service. Adaptive equipment. So it can be used for a large range of items. So that includes durable medical equipment, some incontinence supplies, home delivered meals, specialized medical equipment, any home modifications, PERS unit, those type things. So in the goals section here, so obviously, so the home and community, sorry, I skipped over that. So home and community, you would select the most appropriate one. And if it's, for example, like adaptive equipment, you can mark that NA. In the goals section, so we ask you to provide a summary of the services or items needed to meet the needs of the adult, including why the item is needed. And then on the other resources available, insert a brief summary there of unpaid supports available to the adult. And then, so in this example, we're saying, okay, adaptive equipment, they need briefs, gloves, wipes to maintain their skin health. They have a doctor's prescription. Amazon provides efficient access to needed items. And so the other resources available, they've marked NA, and they're talking about why that Medicaid card didn't cover that. So. All right. So do we have any questions before we jump into the signatures?
We've had a couple of questions come in. The first question was, I have a client who has some stalking issues over text and call. They have been harassing or stalking someone else, and they have been warned by the police already. How does a certified family home handle this? And I think Michael could maybe take this one.
Sure. So in this particular situation, I would refer you back to those HCBS rules to look at what type of restrictive intervention might be required if this really is putting this individual at risk of being arrested and potentially causing harm to someone else, that you would develop a risk mitigation plan for that, whatever that intervention is, and ensure then that you have developed goals around teaching that individual appropriate behavior that would not result in their engaging in this kind of behavior that could put them at risk or somebody else at risk. And so those HCBS requirements are there to assist in those situations where you have somebody who you may have to do something to intervene that could be perceived as a violation of their rights, but then how are you going to ensure that you are working with them to get rid of whatever restrictions might have to be put in place to keep them safe or someone else safe? So hopefully that answered that.
All right, and then the next question that we had come in says, I have already submitted my June plans because of the 45 days before requirement. What would happen to those plans if the June 1st date goes into effect? Do I need to rewrite them now? And I can go ahead and answer that. Plans that have already been submitted would not be required to be rewritten. These new plan documents will take effect for those who have had those new assessments once the new implementation goes into effect. so I think that answers that question, and I'm not seeing, oh, I just saw another one. The next question, did you say only 3 payment categories per section?
So I think that, so no, so in the health, safety, and employment section, so there's residential and discretionary goals, and there are those 5 categories those services that can be billed under the residential and discretionary that comes out of that bucket of money. And then the second section is the health, safety, and employment goals. And so there's only 3 services on self-direct that are part of those health, safety, and employment goals, and these sit outside of their advisory budget that Liberty is going to give them. So they have a different section here, and those 3 are the job support services, skilled nursing, and adaptive equipment. And so they're just separated into different buckets. So you're not limited to only 3 services. We just need to make sure that those certain payment categories fall into the correct bucket of money, whether it comes out of their residential or discretionary services, or whether that's the health, safety, and employment services that are looked at a little bit differently because that falls outside of the budget. And then I do see another question here that kind of ties into that, is where does a wheelchair fall into this? So a wheelchair would be considered a health, safety, employment service. That's going to be adaptive equipment, and it would require the documentation showing that it meets health and safety, the referral from the doctor, that it hasn't been covered by the basic Medicaid, and all that stuff. And I think Alina might have something to add.
I was just going to say, if Deb, if you can give me permission to share my screen, I can show a slide from the first part of this presentation that might help just visually solidify some of that breakdown for folks. I just don't have sharing capacity.
Okay, I'll switch you over as the presenter.
Okay. And then we'll give it right back to Andrea in just a moment.
Yep.
Okay, so this is just slide 31 from the first part of the presentation. And here is where you can see the breakdown. So any of those services that fall under PSS, learning support, emotional, relationship transportation, as well as your support broker and fiscal employer agents, fall into the residential discretionary and planning supports dollars. And it's those employment support services, so JSS, adaptive equipment, AEQ, and specialized nursing services, SNS, that are going to fall into the health, safety, and employment services section. So when Danae was explaining the 3 services, it is these 3 services that are approved outside of or on top of the budget. And it is these services that fall into the budget to either require a health risk, a health risk or a safety risk form if you need to obtain more of this service above and beyond what's available in the budget.
Perfect. I think that visual is really helpful. Do we have any more questions before we jump back into the signature pages? And I see a comment here that says, I can't see Alina's screen that she's talking about. And that whole presentation is posted on the My Choice Matters website. So if for some reason you weren't able to see that what Alina was sharing, I definitely would recommend jumping into that My Choice Matters website, and you can check out that presentation. And it has some really great illustrations regarding those buckets of money. So we have a question here. It says, where can we ask specific case questions? That part adds a lot of questions for a few high needs clients. I think if they're very case specific, you would work with the assigned care manager and kind of talk things out with them and how things will work. So, all right. I'm not seeing any more hands or questions. All right, so we're going to jump into the signature page. Andrew, if you want to jump to that example. So the first section of the signature page is the participant and guardian informed consent section. So this must be signed by the participant on every plan and the guardian if applicable. So they're signing that the participant and guardian directed the development of the plan. The participant made choices on services and providers. The plan meets needs and addresses health and safety, and that changes will not be made without the participant and guardian's consent. The second section here is the informed choice signature. So this also needs to be signed by the participant on every plan and on the guardian, and then a guardian if applicable. So this is just showing that the participant is choosing to receive DD waiver services instead of care in an ICFID facility and can choose the ICFID admission at any time. The last section is the support broker section, and this also needs to be signed on every plan. This is the support broker agreeing that they provided information and support to maximize the participant's ability to make informed choices regarding the services and providers. The plan meets participant needs, addresses health and safety, reflects participant choices, and the support broker is agreeing to monitor the plan, review services to ensure they are delivered according to the plan in accordance with HCBS setting quality requirements. So that is the main signature page. And then also, this is a new signature page. This is a community support worker signature page. So anybody who has agreed to deliver services according to the plan must now print and sign, and they are signing that they've reviewed the service plan and agreed to deliver the services according to it and consistent with HCBS requirements. A couple exceptions to that are the fiscal employer agent. Their annual enrollment with that chosen fiscal employer agent is going to act as their signature. And then the environmental or the AEQ type services, they will not be required to sign this document. But any other services will need to sign this document. So we can pause here for questions regarding signatures. It looks like we've got a couple hands raised too. So we can address the questions in chat and then we'll unmute people. All right. So the one question I'm seeing, when does the CSW sign, before or after submission? So the CSW will sign before submission to the care manager. So if we don't have those signatures, we won't be able to approve the plan. It is a requirement per HCBS that any person delivering those services have signed. So those would be signed prior to submission. Does anybody else see any chat questions?
Yeah, there's one more here. We go.
When employing an agency, who needs to sign? The agency or the worker? So it would be the agency. So the agency is the one responsible for ensuring that those services are being delivered according to the authorized plan of service. So like in this situation, we would just make sure that that is put on there, that they're the authorized representative. I see another one. What if CSW change? Every time somebody is added to the plan or changed on the plan, they do need to sign. What about potential CSWs? So it would only be the CSWs that are authorized to provide services on the plan. And then if we add one or we change one, then you would have to submit a new signature. can we get electronic signatures for these documents for CSWs? We're following the same electronic signature process now. Those requirements are on the DHW website. So if you're following the electronic signature, I wouldn't see an issue with it. And then, does the CSW need to be approved or signed before hiring? I'm not sure. Does any of the self-direct care managers know? Let's see. That's a really good question. We may have to table it and come back to it. Let's see.
See, and then another question. I've had some employers that don't want the total amount of the plan to be shown to CSWs. Can we just show them the goals without the budget?
Right, so you don't need to show the money figures, but we need to show them, they'll need to sign off of what they're agreeing to deliver. So if they're agreeing to deliver a certain amount of hours, they will need to see that, what goals they're going to be working on. They don't have to see the money aspect of it.
Let's see, and then there's another question. Do we need to submit a new form for each person?
So the form has, like as you see on the example here, it's got multiple spots for community support workers. So if you submit the plan and there's 5 community support workers on it, you can use the same page. If they go on to a different page, you'll have to submit 2 pages. If it's something that's added with a plan change, then it'll be a new form. But anytime that CSW is agreeing to provide services, we'll need to see a signature. You wouldn't have to update the old form with new CSWs. You can submit a new form.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat box, but it sounds like we do have a couple of hands that are raised.
I'm unmuting Steve
Okay.
Marciando. I can't pronounce your last name, Steve. I'm sorry.
Marciando, thank you. I'm trying to figure out why we're doing this, and I had a conversation with Michael Case a while back about this, why we can't do TBD. This is not industry standard. This is not backed up by IDAPA rule, and yet now we're getting it rammed down our throats that we have to have this, and it has more work that the care managers are going to have to do to get people hired for the participants.
Why we are doing, can you provide a little more detail, Steve, why we're doing
why we're doing this? Why do we have to have CSWs on the plan? Why CSWs are being now have to be approved by support managers? Why we cannot do TBD on a plan? It's industry standard to develop a job and then get it funded and then go hire somebody. And we're forcing our population to now go find somebody without having it approved on a plan and have them sign up to do all the stuff, and then it may not even be approved. So it's totally backwards industry standard, and it's more work for the care managers, everything. This is just wrong to have this on the plan. And Michael was nice enough to underhandedly, threaten that this would happen to me about a month ago, and here it is. So yeah, go ahead and unmute, Mike. I'd like to hear the response on that, because this is not supported by IDAPA rule. This is policy only, and it's a policy that should not be there.
I understand there's some concerns there. I just want to address that the plan signatures is an IDAPA rule. It's currently at 16.310.317. It's the home and community-based person-centered service plan requirement. It specifically states in there that the plan, and I'm quoting right now because I'm reading it, it says, the plan must also be signed by all individuals and providers responsible for its implementation, indicating they will deliver services according to the authorized plan of service and consistent with home and community-based requirements. So if you see that signature page, that's pulled directly from that IDAPA, that they are agreeing to provide that. And that's ultimately why we've added this to the plan, so that we are compliant with those HCBS requirements.
And in the conversation.
And then Michael, if you wanted to add, yeah.
Yes. So in the conversation that we had, Steve, the question that you asked me was the TBD to begin with. And my response to that was, in order for our care managers to approve and ensure that the person providing the service was appropriate to provide the service, they need to know who it is ahead of time. Your comment was that if a support worker changed mid-plan year, that wasn't always something that we had saw who that was and received that signature beforehand. And my comment was that is a potential that would change because it was inconsistent with what we were doing. It was not a veiled threat. I'm sorry that you took it that way. I understand your concern and your desire to have it as TBD, but that is inconsistent with what's in rule.
Well, it's not what you told me a month ago. You told me it wasn't in rule, it was only in policy.
The signature for the provider for who's providing the service up front is in rule.
It is in rule, and now I've been told that. So, but again, if all you're going to do is, are you doing any kind of background check? Is there anything happening that we need to go back to the care managers on this every time we've got to hire somebody? I've got a participant that's got like 15 CSWs, and they hire one or two, sometimes a month, depending on who's come and who's gone in and out of their lives. And now, there's, again, now we've got to get this approved. I mean, what's the process to add a CSW, mid-year now, versus doing, FEA paperwork and hiring them? At what point do we have to wait for care managers now to approve CSWs with absolutely nothing to base it on other than there's a signature on a piece of paper?
So, and what
I could have Jack the Ripper on there, and other than his name is Jack the Ripper, they might, there's no reason that they would not approve this. And yet we're using everybody's time and money, because it's now more budget money that I have to, go and make up another form to add to the plan and send it to the Department of Health and Welfare, versus just sending this to Consumer Direct.
So what I can say, Steve, is we hear your concern, we've documented your concern, and we will take that back to the team.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Okay.
And Tiffany had a question. One moment.
Hi, I have a lot of the same concerns Steve just mentioned. One of the biggest concerns is, that in our specific area up here in North Idaho, we have a huge issue where, McDonald's, Wendy's, all of these fast food places, Taco Bell, even care places are making more than we can offer these CSWs without significant documentation. They're also getting benefits. They're also, and so we lose people quite often. We lose CSWs to these minimum wage places of employment who require no education, background, experience, and our participants' lives depend on their CSWs. So we are losing these CSWs in high numbers to these other places where they don't need, they don't have someone's life depending on them. And And now we have to get this extra piece of paper and have them sign it before the plan's approved. That's 45 days ahead of a new plan start. And how do you keep, I mean, how does the department expect someone to sit around for 45 days and not be paid through a plan and say, yep, I'm still going to work for that person? I personally am also a CSW, not just a support broker. And I've been waiting for 6 weeks for the department to approve my wage that I negotiated with my participant I work for and their guardian and the team. And I'm unable to work for the last 4 weeks. Should I fill my time and go get a new job? I mean, that is a real life example of what this is doing here. I cannot work for that participant, you know, for that rate, for the rate that's approved. Absolutely cannot for what we're doing. And it's now taken me 4 weeks. I don't even have it back yet. It's quote been reviewed, but it's not even back yet and approved through the support broker for that. So as a CSW and as a parent of participants in this program, I'm appalled that we have to wait now for for our CSWs to each and individually be approved at the beginning of a plan, in the middle of a plan. They already go through all of the background checks with Consumer Direct, and this is a waste of time, a waste of budget money for support brokers. For participants to spend with a support broker, and with support brokers who are almost all full. It's really hard to find one. As a parent, we had to find a new one this year, and it was very difficult for my child and my adult. And, you know, and as a support broker, you know, putting my SB hat back on because that's the training we're in. This is extra time that I'm spending with these people who we can't even guarantee if they're going to wait 45 days to have a job. So there's got to be a better way. This is not the best way, and it's not effective.
All right, so I think we can take this input back, you know, and maybe come back with some more clarification on this to move on so that we can get through, because we do still have a lot of content to cover in this training. I do think we can definitely take your input into consideration and get back with some more clarification. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Michael, before we move on?
No, that works. We've got it documented. We can take this back.
Okay, excellent. So let's go ahead and move on to the support and spending costing page. And so let me give you some basic information about the new SSP costing page. The SSP costing page is going to be a Microsoft Excel worksheet. It's going to be locked to protect all of the formulas that are in that worksheet. And then the formulas in the worksheet are going to automatically calculate the plan length based on the dates that are entered. It will contact the budgets based on the selected service mix and level, and then those budgets will automatically be prorated based on plan dates for the prorated and mid-year plans. And then the budget category and totals will also automatically calculate, as well as a fiscal plan summary of information, and I'll show an example of that in some later slides. And then there's some other worksheet features that the costing page will have. There will be some drop-down menus for the different categories and service settings. Again, that will be just a drop-down menu. And then there will be alerts that will appear if a plan is over budget. And then the plan summary will automatically populate the average hours based on category and based on service setting. And so kind of like how Danae did, we've got instruction slides here that have a lot of information. There will also be information in the manual that will be on the external website. But just so that this isn't duplicative, I'm going to go ahead and skip straight to the examples to go through these. This is what the header of the costing page will look like. There are fields for you to put in the adult's name, their Medicaid ID number, the name of the support broker, And then for the service mix and level, there's a drop-down menu. And so you can select whatever service mix or level is on the participant's eligibility letter. And then over in the right-hand column, there is a plan start date and a plan end date to be entered. And so then once all of that information has been entered, the number of months in the plan is going to automatically populate. So in this example, for a full year plan, that will automatically populate as being 12 months. And then this next section that says prorated plan will automatically populate to say no. If we have a prorated or a mid-year plan, then that is going to have however many months are in that plan. And then under prorated plan, it will say yes. And then if for some reason those dates are not entered correctly, maybe there's a typo in there or it's for more than 1 year, it will give an error message to let you know to correct those dates. And then we'll go ahead and move on to the next section of the costing. And that is the section for the residential and discretionary services. And so in the first section, this is where you'll be able to choose from those services that are the residential and discretionary. So the PSS, LSS, RSS, ESS, and TSS will be the options in the drop-down menu in the categories column. And so you'll select that category. And then in the next column where it says service setting, that is also going to be a drop-down menu. And so the options that will be in that menu will be home or community. So you can select home or community for either of those. And then the next column is for the community support worker or the name of the vendor. And so you'll type that information into this column. The next column is hours or items per year. And so for this section, you'll put in how many hours or how many items per year are being requested. And then the next column is the cost or hours per item. And that must include the employer taxes on that. And then another thing that I failed to mention is that when putting these in for the community support worker or the vendor, you can list multiple CSWs if they're paid the same rate, but tax exempt employees must be on their own line. And so you'll enter in the cost, and then this annual cost is going to automatically calculate for you based on what you put in for the hours and the cost. And so that's it for this first top section. And then down below for the support broker services, the category SBS is going to automatically be populated there for you, since that's the only option under the support broker services. And then the name of the support broker will also automatically fill in based on what was typed in up in that header for the name of the support broker. And then for the hours per year, that needs to be typed in, and that should match the number of hours that were put onto the SSP. And then the cost per hour, and again, that needs to, the rate of pay cannot exceed the $18.72 per hour before the employer taxes. And then that annual cost is going to automatically populate in that field. And then the last section is for the fiscal employer agent. And so where it says chosen FEA, there's a drop-down menu and you can choose from the available FEA. So right now we've got Consumer Direct and Acumen. So you can choose which FEA. And then once you choose that, the FEA annual cost will automatically populate based on which FEA was chosen and how many months are in the plan. And then once all three of those sections are completed, down here at the bottom, and maybe you can see my mouse on here, where it says residential and discretionary services total, that will be the total amount of residential and discretionary services. And then for the residential and discretionary budget, that's the amount of the budget. Now, in these examples, the budget amounts in here are just examples to show the functionality of this cost sheet. And before we release the final version, it will have all of the updated budgets in the cost sheet. So right now, this $20,000 budget is just a number in here to try to show the functionality of the worksheet. And then this last field, the residential and discretionary budget remaining, that is the amount of budget that is remaining, or like in this case, this was over that $20,000 budget, so it would show that this is over by 13,891.14. So if it is over budget, you'll see this red banner that's down here at the bottom that says budget modification request required. The request is over the assigned budget. And so that will pop up just to remind support brokers that it is over budget. And so a budget modification would be required in this case. And then we'll go ahead and move on to the next section, which is the health, safety, and employment section of the cost page. And so you can see we've got this first column is the category column. And the options in this column will be the AEQ, JSS, and SNS. Those will be the only three available options for the category in this section. And then for the service setting, you'll have the home and community options in that drop down, but then you'll also have an option for AEQ to be used whenever requesting anything in that adaptive equipment category. And then the same thing applies with the community support worker or the vendor or item. You'll put the name of the vendor or the employees with the same guidelines as the above section. And then the same with the hours or items per year that will be entered into this column, probably similar to your current costing sheet, how you would do that. And then the cost per hour or the cost per item would go into this next section. And then the annual cost will automatically calculate for all of those. And then down here at the bottom, it says health, safety, and job support services total. And so that will be the total of all of the services in this section. And then since the health, safety, and employment are considered separately from the assigned budget, anytime anything is entered into this section, this red banner will appear that says supporting documentation required. And so that's just a reminder to support brokers to submit that supporting documentation with the plan. And we go over all of that information for what documentation is required in part 1 of this training. So you can refer to that if you've got any questions as far as what documentation is required. And then the next section on this costing page is the employee qualifications. And so this section is available to capture the training or the qualifications required to appropriately and safely support the adult. And then you'll attach additional information to the plan if needed. And so the first section applies to CSWs and to direct support vendors. And so that's any and all training that's required or needed to provide the service. And it should align with any training needs that are identified on the employment contract that's on file with the chosen FEA. And then the second section applies to other specialized staff. And so you would just list any specialized staff that are on the plan, and just remember to attach their license or certification or whatever other required documents are needed. So in this example, for that specialized staff, we have there's an RN on the plan. And so they would note that and then attach that license. And then the next section of the plan is the plan summary. And so this information is going to, most of this is going to automatically populate for you. So I'll go through the different sections. This first section on the left-hand side, totals by service setting. And this is going to break down the spending on the plan into a couple of different categories. So we have the in-home services total. And so that's going to be broken down. There's going to be the amount that was spent that is out of the residential and discretionary, the amount that is health, safety, and employment, and then there's a total for in-home. And then for community services, we also have those totals. There's how much residential and discretionary was spent, how much health, safety, and employment, and then that community total here. And then for adaptive equipment, you're only going to see adaptive equipment in the health, safety, and employment section. And so that will total as well. So you'll have that adaptive equipment total. And then over on the right-hand side, we have a chart here that I'd like to go over. At the top, it says hours, and then down this side column, it has all of the different categories. And so going by category, if we come over into this chart, it's going to break down how many hours are on the plan by how many hours a year. And then it will also have an average weekly and then an average daily. And then all of these totals will add up. And then down here at the bottom, in yellow, it has the total number of hours for the plan, the total number of average weekly, and then the average daily. And so as a support broker, this is a tool there for you as well to be able to look at this, and you can see like, okay, for, you know, we're asking for approximately 19 hours of personal supports. We're asking for approximately 10 hours a week of job support. And then for the plan total, we're asking for an average of about 47, almost 48 hours a week, and an average daily of almost about 7 a day. That can help to guide your plan development to try to help you see exactly how those hours break down. And then over in this far right-hand column, we have the category cost. And then that's going to have that category cost for each total. This is what's going to go over to the FEA. And this is the information that just has how much the total is for each category. And then down at the bottom, we have a couple of different categories, just again, breaking down the spending on the plan. So first we have the overall plan total. And so that is the total of all services on the support and spending plan. And then the 3 categories underneath it all will add up to that overall plan total. So we first have the residential and discretionary total that's within budget. So this is the amount of residential and discretionary supports that are within the budget. So this person in this example had a $20,000 budget. They used all of that. So that's going to be the full $20,000. And then the next section is the additional residential and discretionary services. So that is above budget, or in other words, the budget modification amount. So in this example, they had a budget modification of $13,891.14. And then there's also a health, safety, and employment total, which is the total amount of those health, safety, and employment services that have also been added to the plan. And then down here at the bottom, we have a place here on the left for care managers to sign when they are authorizing the plan. And then on the right-hand side, we have a place to address the ARP budgets. And we talked about this in the first training. So what the support broker will do is in this ARP budget field, they will type in that amount from the eligibility notice. And I've got 2 different examples here. This first example is showing that this entire plan is under that ARP budget. So then this highlighted field is going to show up that says the overall plan total is lower than or equal to the ARP budget. And then it will ask, would you like to use your ARP budget instead of submitting a budget modification request for services over your advisory budget? And then there will be a drop-down menu right here that says, and you can choose yes, no, or NA. And then there's just a little reminder down here at the bottom that any services over the advisory budget, including services requested using the ARP budget, must meet the prior authorization criteria in IDAPA. And so with that, we went through that pretty fast. Let's go ahead and open it up for questions on the cost page.
Okay, Andrea, so I see one that says, will the prorated months be broken down into weeks or days as needed?
It will be broken down into months. If there are any special circumstances where there may be a need where maybe it's just off by a couple weeks or something, that's pretty rare, then you would work individually with the care manager regarding any needs on that.
Okay, the next question I see is, do volunteer jobs or job training at lesser pay now go into LSS or similar?
So I think if I'm understanding that question correctly, so yeah, volunteer jobs or unpaid job training or something like that that doesn't meet that criteria for being, you know, integrated employment, those would go over into one of the other service categories under the residential and discretionary services.
Okay, and we have a comment here that says support brokers are going to need a pay increase. And I know that our leadership has noted from previous trainings that that is something that's being looked into, and that limitation on support brokers. So I don't believe there's any new news on that, but I know that that concern has been brought up and it's been documented. So the next question that I can see is the SSP a document that's formatted for Windows Doc, Google Doc, or a Mac Doc? I'm concerned that this will not open on my Mac and will not transfer back to the care managers.
So these documents, the SSP is a Microsoft Word document, and then the costing page is a Microsoft Excel document. So I do believe those programs will be needed to be able to use these documents.
So just to pipe in here, on a Mac, you should be able to open the documents, but you would need to, when you go to save them, you would need to click export, and you should be able to export to a Word format or an Excel format to send them that way.
Okay, so the next one I see is, can we please see the chat box comments from others in this training? I do believe that all of the comments right now are going to all panelists, so I don't believe there's unless there's an everyone option, I don't believe that's possible at this time. We'll take note though for future trainings. Who was on the committee to create these documents? Were any support brokers included? I am not 100% sure of all who was included in this. I know the plan was created to meet all the HCBS requirements and go through those things. So did anybody want to add anything to that?
I don't think I have anything to add to that.
The next one we have is this stating that all CSWs will need to have a background check before able to provide services, as the FEA currently has a background waiver form, or was that just used as an example?
And I don't know if I'm understanding the question on that. Are you referring to, I'm going to flip back here just a second. So, I mean, nothing is really changing with requirements for background checks. I think that is the best way that I can answer that. So, I know that on SD there is an ability to waive a background check. But if the participant does not want to waive that and they've put specifically in those qualifications that they need to have a background check, then that would be something that would be required. If they want to be able to waive that, then I think that would still be following the same existing process. Is there anything that anybody else would like to add to that?
I don't have anything. The next question that I see is, when does the ARP budget expire?
I can speak to that. It is not yet known the exact date when the ARP budgets will expire. It is dependent upon a couple of things, specifically rules provided by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid around the spend period for using the ARP dollars, and then the amount of time that it will take for the state to spend their required matching amount for those dollars. Right now, the estimate for Idaho is in March of 2024, but that remains an estimate. And we will, if that date changes, we'll definitely let people know.
And then the last question I have is, how many hours are you all anticipating each plan will be taking to plan and write?
I don't know if we have an exact number that has been designated. Michael, do you have anything to add to that?
My apologies. I was dealing with another issue real quick. What was the question again, please?
How many hours are you all anticipating each plan will be taking to plan and write?
I don't know that we have an estimate for that. I wouldn't imagine that it would take much longer than what the current plans take. But that's something that we'll have to assess as we go through.
All right, and that's all the questions that I am seeing.
We do have, I see a hand raised for Annette Scott.
There you
Are you
go.
there? Hello? I was just
Yep, we can hear ya.
referencing back to the question regarding the background check as it was used in an example in the qualifications, and I didn't know if that was a new thing that the department was requiring for CSWs, as there is in the employment packet under the FEA, there is a waiver form for that.
Correct, yes. So yeah, they still are going to have that ability to waive that. So that was just an example.
Yeah.
So
I think it was answered.
there
Okay.
that is a requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And then a couple more questions have come. Is there still a KW budget? And there is not still going to be a KW budget. However, the ARP budget will be in effect, and Alina might be able to add more to that.
Yeah, so because the ARP budget is the highest budget that any participant has had from April 1st, 2021 through when we implement the new budget model, for almost all participants, that will just equal what their current KW budget is, because it's on April 1st, 2021, moving forward, people had access to the highest budget they'd had since, I believe, 2016, or the requirements of KW. But because KW is no longer the reason why that budget is in effect, it's because of the American Rescue Plan, that language is being modified. So the ARP budget, in terms of the amount of money available, will be more or less equivalent to the current KW budget for participants.
Thank you. And then we just have a comment that says, that this documentation will double our hours. We will definitely take that input back and look at how long it is taking for these for this documentation to occur. And that's all the questions that I'm seeing. So let's go ahead and move on because we do still have quite a bit to get through. And I want to make sure that we get through all of this information. So we'll go ahead and move on to the support and spending plan changes. And so a support and spending plan change needs to be submitted anytime that there is a change in support type, anytime that there's a change in service type, services are being added to the plan or removed from the plan. If a CSW or vendor is being added at a rate of pay that is above the fair market rate, which would require an outline of qualifications and or certification. And then there is a certified family home, a loan time request that can be submitted instead of a plan change if they want to add or increase a loan time in a certified family home where they already reside. A support and spending plan change is not required if there's a change in address, if there's a change in support broker, if there's no change in the volume or the rate of pay for support broker services, or if there's a change in CSW, if there's no change in the volume or rate of pay for the services and that the amount of pay is not above fair market rate. And then a new mid-year plan will need to be submitted for any changes in the participant service mix. And that includes if they're changing waiver options between traditional and self-direct or self-direct to traditional, or a change in their support level. And so when a support and spending plan change is submitted, they need to submit the support and spending plan change form, all of the required signatures, and then any additional supplemental forms or supporting documentation that applies to the change being requested. And so the support and spending plan change is also going to be a Microsoft Excel document similar to the SSP costing sheet. It will be locked to protect all of the formulas, and those will automatically calculate the new budget category and new plan totals and the new fiscal plan summary information. And then it will still have those same features as the costing sheet. There will be the drop downs for categories and service setting. There will be alerts that will appear if a plan is over budget. And then a plan summary will automatically populate the average change in hours based on category and on service setting. And so again, we've got the instructions in here, but we're going to go ahead and skip straight to the example. You'll again have access to this slide deck, and as well, when the manual comes out, all of these directions will be in the manual as well. So the header for the plan change is a little bit similar to the costing. There's a place for the adult name, Medicaid ID number, the name of the support broker, and then there is a place for the plan change number to number how many plan changes there have been, starting with 1 and moving on. The plan start date and end date, and then the service mix and level. And so all three of these, the start and end date and the service mix and level, should always be the same on these plan changes. And then the plan change start date will be entered in. And then we have a reason for the plan change for you to enter in the reason and what is being changed on the plan. And then we'll go ahead and move on to the next section of the plan change form. And so these 3 sections up here at the top, the previous residential and discretionary services total, the residential and discretionary budget, and then the previous residential and discretionary budget remaining, those will need to be entered in by the support broker. And then for the residential and discretionary services, These columns are set up very similar to the plan costing. We have those same categories available for residential and discretionary that are in that drop-down menu. The same with the service setting. Those will be the same as the cost page. Entering in community support workers and vendors will work exactly the same. The number or hours or items per year. So for this, if you are removing or reducing a service, that's going to be a negative number. So in this example, they're removing 45 hours. So it's a negative 45. And then they're adding 45. So this bottom one where they're adding 45 here. And then in the next column, we have the cost or cost per hour or item. And so that amount will be entered in, and that's always going to be a positive number. That will never be negative, even if you're removing a service. And then the annual cost is going to automatically calculate in this right-hand column for those changes. And then we have sections down here for support broker services. So if there is a change in support broker where there is a plan change required, there are sections here for you to enter in the name of the support brokers, the hours are per year that are being changed, the cost per hour, and then that annual cost will automatically calculate. Then in the fiscal employer agent section, this is just for when a participant is changing FEAs, and there's very specific rules about that. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but we do have a section here for it if that ever happens. So we have the category FEA here, where they can type in the name of the fiscal employer agents and then these annual costs, and we have a worksheet to help calculate these, and then whatever's put into these first top two sections where they're switching, it will calculate that that annual cost change to the plan. Oops, I lost my place here. All right. And then for the down here in the totals, we have a residential and discretionary services change. So in this example, they just switched from one category to another. So there was no change in cost. So this is just going to be a 0. And then it will have the new residential and discretionary total, the new residential and discretionary budget, and then it has the new residential and discretionary budget remaining. So in this case, we have that example with just that $20,000 budget. So it is over budget. And so because of that, this banner is going to appear, and the banner is going to say budget modification request may be required. The request is over the assigned budget. And so for that, that is a reminder to support brokers that they may need to submit budget modification. If services are being removed, then you wouldn't need to submit documentation. But if there's being a change or an addition to services that weren't already approved on the plan, then you would need to submit a budget modification. And so if there's any questions on that ever, you would refer those to the care manager to see if you need to submit a budget modification request. And then the next section is that health, safety, and employment section. So up here at the top, there's the previous health, safety, and job support services total. And so you'll enter in that total onto the plan change form. And then this is set up just like above. The categories just for this section will be available in the categories. You'll select the service setting from the drop-down menu, the name of the community support worker or the vendor, and then how many hours or items per year, the same. So this one, they're adding 100 units, so it's positive. If they were removing it, would be negative. And then the cost per hour or item is going to be entered in there as well. And then the annual cost will automatically calculate. And then down here at the bottom, there will be a health, safety, and job support services change. And so this amount is the amount of change to the plan, and that will automatically calculate. And then a new health, safety, and job support services total will calculate here. And then anytime that there is something in this section, this supporting documentation may be required is going to appear. And so if you're adding services, like in this case, we are adding services, then that documentation would be required. And again, you can refer to, we had the first training that goes over what the documentation is for those services. And then that information will also be available in the manual that will be available on our external website. Okay, and then for the plan summary, for this section, these are the previous totals by service setting, and support brokers are going to need to enter this information into the plan change form. So in this first left-hand section, for the in-home services, these fields that are in white are the ones that are going to need to be typed in from either the previous SSP costing, or if there have been previous plan changes from the most recent plan change. So you would type in these amounts, and then the in-home total that's here in yellow will automatically calculate for you. And then the same with the community services and the adaptive equipment. Those fields in white need to be entered in from those previous documents. And then the previous totals by category, those also will need to be entered in by the support broker. And then the next section of this plan summary are the new totals by service setting, and these are going to automatically populate. We'll have the new in-home community and adaptive equipment totals that will be just the same as what you saw on the SSP costing. And then the change in hours, this is going to have, instead of giving brand new hourly totals, this is going to show how much change from the original plan or from the most recent plan changes being made. So you would be able to look at this and we could see, looking at all the plan totals, is that there's an addition of 150 hours to the plan. So an average of about a half an hour a day is really what's being changed here. And then over here on the right-hand column, this new category costs, these are going to be those new totals that will go over to the FEA. And this would also be the amount if there's multiple plan changes. This would be where you would pull those totals from when filling out the next plan change. And then down here at the bottom, we have the new overall plan total. And so that's the total of all services on the plan. And then beneath it, just like on the costing, we have those three categories: the amount of residential and discretionary that is within the budget, the amount of any additional residential and discretionary that's over budget or that budget modification amount. And then this last one is the health, safety, and employment total that will be entered there. And all three of these add up to that overall plan total. And then this last section for the plan change is signatures. So we have a place on here for the participant, their guardian if they have one, and the support broker to sign on this plan change. And then we have a place for the care manager to sign when they're authorizing the plan change. And then down here at the bottom, we also have a section to reflect the ARP budgets. It's very similar to what was on the plan change, but this time I'm going to show an example of what will appear when the overall plan total exceeds that ARP budget. And so if the plan is exceeding the ARP budget, there will be, this will come out and be highlighted red and say the overall plan total exceeds the ARP budget. Budget modification request required for services over your advisory budget. Has a budget modification request been submitted with the plan? And then there is a drop down here to select yes, no, or NA. And then there's this little reminder over here that any services that are over the advisory budget, including services that are requested using the ARP budget, must meet those prior authorization criteria that we talked about earlier in the training. And then We also do have the community support worker signature page. And so this would be required anytime there's changes to CSW based services. Those CSWs must sign this supplemental form. And so with that, let's go ahead and stop for questions on the plan change form.
You have a hand up from Annette Scott.
Oh, no.
Okay. You want to go ahead and unmute her?
I thought I did. There we go.
No, I didn't. If I did, I didn't mean to
Okay.
put my hand up.
All right. And I don't know. Let's see here. I am not seeing, I see one question here. And I think it's one that we can just take under an advisement that there's a shortage of support brokers right now. Is there any consideration of how many clients will likely be dropped? Not out of choice, but necessity. Many of us have over 50 clients. Has anyone who's actually written an SSP or been a support broker been included in developing this new form? So we can definitely take this feedback back to the team. I think this is something that was addressed in some previous questions. So we'll definitely take that feedback back to the team. We have another question. If we are moving categories for CSW, then we need the CSW signatures. And so the answer on that, I believe, would be a yes, because then if it's changing categories, that would be changing what they're working on in those goals. So I do believe that signature would be required. Does anyone else have anything to add on that?
I don't.
Okay. Let's see here. And I'm seeing questions about the signature form. And again, I think we're going to go ahead and take those back and we'll try to get some additional clarification on that because we do still have a lot to get through. There was a question about the KW injunction that once the new implementation, we will have the ARP budget in place, but it won't be called the KW injunction still. And so we'll go ahead and I'm trying to see if there's any other questions. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to these last few forms because we've only got a few minutes left of this training. So let's go into the certified family home alone time changes. And so this, again, I'm going to skip through the examples, but this is just if a participant is making a change to alone time in a certified family home where they already reside. And so the main header is very similar to the plan where they'll put in the participant's name, their Medicaid ID number, and their plan start date. And then the participant and guardian information. So that will need to be entered into the form and the guardian information if they have one. And then there's a section, this form was developed for both traditional and self-direction. And so you will see references to both, but for the purposes of this training, we'll just refer to the support broker. So you put in the support broker's name, phone number, email, and mailing address. And then the alone time questions in a certified family home, there's some questions here that would need to be answered. So the first question is, has the participant utilized alone time in the past? They'd answer yes or no. And then if they answer yes, you would describe how much and for how long, and if discontinued, explain why. So for this example, it says that John currently has 1 hour a day of alone time at home. And then the next question, does the participant or guardian want to utilize alone time now? So we would expect this answer to be a yes if this form is being submitted, indicating that the participant does actually, or the guardian wants to utilize the alone time. And then the follow-up question for that is to describe the volume of alone time that's being requested, and when and where that alone time will take place. So in this example, it says that John has done well with 1 hour of alone time at home and would like to increase to 2 hours per day with time both at home and in the community. And so then this third question asks to describe the risk or safety concerns when the participant is alone and identify what measures are in place to minimize the risk. And then specifically for self-direction, to include 3 backup plans to address each risk and our safety concerns. So for our example here, it says, John is very trusting of strangers and could be vulnerable to financial exploitation by others. The certified family home will discuss safety skills before community alone time activities, and John will only take enough money into the community to pay for his own activities. And then for the 3 backup plans, we have my parents will always be available via phone when I'm alone. Number 2, if my parents aren't available, my neighbor is aware of my needs and is a trusted friend and will assist if needed. And then for number 3, my friend Nate is also available to assist me in the event I have an emergency in the community and my above supports are not available. And then below that, we just have a section for signatures for the participant and the guardian if they have one to sign. And then the support broker should also sign this form. And then it's submitted to the department, and the care manager will sign this when they're approving that. And then let's go ahead and move quickly. We've got a couple of other special use forms, and then we'll go ahead and see if there's any additional questions. For this next form, this is a mileage reimbursement for integrated employment. And so this form is only to be used when there are transportation or TSS that's being requested for employment purposes, and it's the only service pushing the plan over budget. And so that's the only time that you would use this form. And so this form also has a header, just like the others, for the participant's name, Medicaid ID, and plan start date. And then the participant and guardian contact information would need to be entered in as well. And then there is an explanation for this form for the budget modification for employment that's just kind of describing the purpose of the form. And then down below, there's an area for a brief summary. And so you would type in a summary for what's being requested. So for this example, it says, John works 4 days a week in an integrated job setting. He requires 14 miles round trip each workday in the amount of 56 miles a week. So it's 2,912 miles annually. And this exceeds the assigned budget amount for employment related purposes only. And so then the next section over here, total annual cost over budget. And so they put in the amount that it's over budget. So in this case, it was $1,114.30 over the assigned budget amount. And then the total amount is the $1,630.72 for the total. And then on this form, there is a checkbox, and these checkboxes need to be marked, just acknowledging the information here. So this first checkbox is just verifying that the participant requires that mileage to obtain integrated community employment. And so this is not mileage for mileage to volunteer or an informal job that's non-paid. You can still request transportation, but that would come out of the residential and the discretionary budget. And wouldn't be for necessarily budget modification for employment. And then the second checkbox is just acknowledging that there was a comprehensive review of all of the services on the SSP, and that the person-centered planning team has identified that additional budget dollars are required to access mileage to get to and from work. And then down here at the bottom, there is a signature section for the participant and guardian, if they have one, to sign. And then this last form that we'll go through really quick, this is the form I referred to earlier. This is for if there is a fiscal employer agent change form. So the only time that this will be used is if changing FEA, and it should accompany a plan change as well. There's a header at the top, just like the other documents, for participant name, Medicaid ID, and plan start date. And then there's, again, a section for the participant and guardian, if they have one, contact information. There's a section for the support broker contact information. And then down below that, there is a fiscal employer agent information to put in information regarding who the current FEA is and who the receiving FEA is. And it does ask for some start and end dates and for some FEA costs. And there is an attached worksheet to that form to help walk you through how to come up with those dates and what those totals are. If you do have any questions on these, you would want to reach out to your care manager on that. And then at the bottom of that form, there's a section for signatures by the participant and guardian and the support broker, and then a section for the care manager to sign as well when they are approving that plan change and change in FEA. And I apologize, there is one more form. I was thinking we were at our last one, but we have one more. And this is the SSP goal page. It looks very similar to the goal page in the support and spending plan. And this must accompany any plan change that's adding a service that's not already authorized on the SSP. And then it can also be used to describe any services that are already authorized that are being either increased or decreased. And so you would fill this out the exact same way as you would the supports, the services and supports on the SSP. And then really quickly, we'll just do a quick overview of appeals. Participants have the right to appeal all program eligibility determinations, the results of program assessments, support level assignments, verification review decisions, their assigned budget, the outcome of any budget modification requests, any requests for a change in service mix, or a request for a change in condition, and they can also appeal any authorizations for services. So if a participant disagrees with a decision that's made by DHW, they must request a hearing within 28 days from when the notice was mailed. And then requests for appeals must be in writing, and they can be submitted on the BDDS appeals request form that's attached to all the notices of action that are sent out, or they can write a letter requesting an appeal. They also have the right to withdraw their request for an appeal at any time. And then there will be further details on submitting an appeal that is included on all of the notices as well. And so with that, we've only got a couple minutes left, but we can see if we can get to a few questions. I think questions that we can't get to, we can definitely take those back to the team to address.
And Andrea, this is Danae. I just wanted to chime in a little bit. We hear the concerns about the plan development time doubling and a lot of extra work. So I'm going to pop an email into the chat box for any of those feedback if you want to send it. And if you could, please include specifics that include what you think is going to take more time. If it's just the CSW signatures, or if there's something specifically in the plan, so we can look at that and hear those concerns and try to see what we can come up with to address them. So I'm popping that email into the chat. It's hcbswaivers@dhw.idaho.gov. And then there is that one question there that says, so this would be for a volunteer job, correct? Or would not be for a volunteer job, correct? Regarding the new employment form.
And yes, that is correct. So that form is only for competitive integrated employment. They can still request transportation on their plan through TSS, but that would go under the residential and discretionary services, and they would not need to submit that form if it's for a volunteer job, because it would be coming out of their residential or discretionary budget.
Okay, and then we had one more question, back to the signatures. Who is responsible for getting CSW signatures every time there's a plan change? And that responsibility would fall on to the participant or the support broker.
All right, and I'm not seeing any additional questions. Are you seeing any, Danae? Oh, it does look like there's another one. Will all fields need to be completed on the new SSPs? So go ahead.
Did you want me to answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, yeah, every field is a required field. If for some reason, like when we discussed on that SSP document, if there's for some reason the participant's not able to participate or give a goal for that, we would just need narrative in there describing why that field isn't filled out. If there's something like there's no rights being restricted, there are sections that where if you click no, you can skip that section, and those are specifically indicated. I do want to make note, there will be an external manual posted with the SSP instructions that give great detail into how to fill out those SSPs.
All right. And I think with that, we are out of time. So we'll go ahead and end this training. Thank you for participating with us in this training. And we will definitely take some of the feedback that we've received in this training back to the team as well.
Thank you, everybody.